Hello again, everybody. This is Fred Kranz from St. Onge, coming to you with another episode of Taking the Supply Chain Pulse. Today we have with us St. Onge's own Hue Roach, one of the longtime employees at St. Onge and an expert in healthcare logistics. Hugh, thanks for joining us.
Well, Fred, thank you for having me. I look forward to the podcast and getting the word out. And this is a very important subject to me. I know that we're going to talk about the evolution of healthcare logistics. And I just wanted to put it in perspective. This is not to basically go back until the 1400s and talk about the entire evolution of logistics within the healthcare setting. But I wanted to talk really about my experience over the past 45 years.
Well, I'm glad we didn't go back to when the Carthaginians used elephants to take the supplies across the Alps. Who was that? I forgot who it was that did that, but it was one of the great logistical things. Hugh, what's your title at St. Onge? How long have you been there? Tell us a little bit about your St. Onge experience before we get into finding out why you wanted to do this podcast and stuff. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
I joined St. Onge roughly about 10 years ago. They asked me to come in with my expertise and provide, actually, it was some mentoring capabilities, but also sales to basically bolster their presence on the West Coast. And because of my education, my background in healthcare logistics, I did too well in the way of sales. So they asked me if I could go back on the line and start working the projects. So all in all, I've been with them 10 years. I am a director, and I have a full working knowledge of healthcare design and operations.
So why did you want to do this podcast about logistics?
Well, I had just mentioned that, I was with St. Onge for 10 years, but really my background in healthcare is over 45 years. And in that 45 years, I have looked at hospitals from an operational standpoint, from a design standpoint, and that includes over 350 hospitals in 14 different countries. And I've learned a lot, when it comes to operations. That includes supply chain, but also the design of supply chain and other logistic areas within hospitals. And all in all, I want to share my knowledge. There's a lot of designers out there that, don't have the experience that I do. There's a lot of healthcare owners that, haven't seen what I've seen, and I want to pass on that knowledge.
Well, that's good. As I've actually got you beat. Next year, 2025, will mark the 60th year that I've been in healthcare. I became a U.S. Navy hospital corpsman in 1965, and if I live long enough, I will have made it to 60 years in this business. And of course, in Vietnam, I've had a couple of these podcasts where we've talked about the fact that it was logistics as much as it was our expertise as a corpsman. I was a grunt corpsman, a medic with the Marines, but it was logistics that saved people's lives because we could get a wounded man stabilized in the field, get him on a helicopter, and an hour later he could be in the perfect place for the next step of care, and then from there it was to another place, and all this is logistics. And today, as healthcare continues to reach out back toward the home, logistics has become more and more and more important and more of a difficult problem for the supply chain folks to solve. So why don't you? And that's why I'm interested in. We're going to have a two-part series of this too, folks. So Hugh is going to talk to us today, and then we'll have a later follow-up second part of this. But what does the term healthcare logistics mean? Please explain that.
Well, let me go ahead and give you a little history of my background because it kind of rolls into logistics. I didn't start in Vietnam, but I started, as a grunt in a warehouse, just working for a material handling company. And I was actually putting myself through college and working during the days, going to school at night. But I worked for a supply chain material handling system vendor that basically catered to the healthcare industry. I was moved from the warehouse inside, became knowledgeable about their systems and how they supported healthcare operations, and I began designing those systems within healthcare facilities, and that included pneumatic tube systems as well as automatic guided vehicles, and how they basically moved items within the facility, either lab specimens, pharmaceuticals, and on the AGVS systems, more scheduled items as linen, medical supplies, and pharmaceuticals. So that's how I was kind of introduced into the healthcare industry. Uh, After that, I actually moved over to a consulting firm where I learned the rest of supply chain within the healthcare, which include taking a look at what was coming in across the service stocks, taking a look at supplies coming into material management, linen for distribution by housekeeping, bulk food, patient meals, pharmacy medications, sterile processing. I also basically at that point learned waste management, which is the outbound of items going out, housekeeping, SPD instrument processing. I also got education on other systems as pneumatic and gravity chutes and elevators. So what I'm getting at is kind of all those things combined is what I refer to as logistics. And logistics is very important to hospital operations because once you get the material, first you have to get the right material into the facility. You have to stage that material. You have to get it a point of use at the right time in the work cycle. And then once it's done, you have to get either soil, linen, or waste commodities out to basically have successful clinical, operations. So all in all those items kind of mixed together, I refer to as logistics.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that because I was a history major, by the way. So if I had heard the term logistics because I majored in history, and to me, logistics was a military term that really dealt in my head with the moving of supplies and materials needed to conduct the war, if you will. And yet, when I got to the healthcare supply chain, I became director of CPD at Baptist in Miami in 1973. I the word logistics was never used anywhere. I mean,
Mm,
you could have asked 100% of the people that were uh, directors of purchasing. First of all, we went from directors of purchasing and central distribution to materials management to supply chain. The term supply chain is relatively recent by comparison, and I don't think they could have told you what logistics was. And so, I've learned more about it as the years have gone by. But why is logistics, healthcare logistics, important to you?
Well, over the years, when I began my career 45 years ago, when I was, starting to work with design professionals, they kind of basically focused on what I want to refer to as the revenue generating departments within healthcare. And that included things like the ORs, pharmacies, things that really basically, were profitable for the hospital operations. And really the back of house logistic areas and systems were secondary thoughts. You know, you know, they didn't think about that. And we kind of got the, bad end of the stick in the sense that, you know, first come, first serve when it came to revenue generating departments, when it came to space, and whatever was left over, we had to design, even at the cost of operational efficiencies of those departments. It became the form fit the fun, well, the function fit the form, meaning this is the space we got left, make it work at the cost of operational efficiency. So, it's important to me because I've always kind of promoted um, the efficiency operation of things like supply chain, housekeeping, environmental services, SPD, those cost centers, because I understood that they had to make things work with what they have. And that still happens today. So I became a proponent for them, each and every job. So, I put up the flag, I campaigned for it. And it's just been recently where, these cost reimbursements have kind of shrunk so the profits are lower, and they're looking at different ways of improving healthcare profitability, that they're now starting to look at these logistic operations and systems.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that focus on revenue is I was just at the Bellwether League event this week, and one for the first time I heard someone other than me say what I'm going to say now is this, that if you're running he was talking about a 3% margin. He was making it more difficult. I say a 5% margin, which very few not-for-profits run. But if you're running a 5% margin, then in order to make $1 worth of profit, you have to take in $20 worth of revenue. And so conversely, if you every dollar you save in operations by being better cost effectively at what you do, you're negating the need for $20 worth of revenue. And so actually improvement in functionality and improvement in operations that reduce costs has a bigger impact
Mm.
than the revenue itself does on things, but no one ever looked at it that way. And so you saw that from the beginning. So to give everyone a baseline, when you started 40, did they had pencils and paper and manual spreadsheets and protractors, right? They use uh, what issues
I'll,
did you, huh? Go ahead.
I'll kind of age myself on this one because, as I said, I started my career with a material handling company, and I started doing system design. And it was actually on a drafting board with a lead pencil and an eraser, and you created drawings physically that you had to hand over and reproduce them and then ship them over to the architect so they could put it in their stack of drawings. So it was as you can tell a long time ago,
Yeah.
but a lot of improvements, not only from a design standpoint, but operationally since I started. I'll go back and just make a statement. Probably every hospital I've been to, it's basically um, becoming a little bit less common, not as much as I'd like to see it, but all the healthcare facilities I saw in the beginning is this is the leftover space we have. This is what you got to operate in. And, give credits to the people who operated those departments. They made it work. I mean, it was not the most efficient way of doing it, but, I saw a lot of dedicated people basically leverage what they had to basically ensure, proper patient care and clinical operations.
Yeah. And so when you started out, what were the issues you saw with logistics operation, transport systems, and their design?
Well, having come from the equipment supplier side of things, I could, see what I did as an engineer for the equipment supplier, and it was my job to design a system to fulfill the transport requirement of the facility. But at the same time, it was my job to basically value engineer the system to basically reduce the cost, improve profitability for the equipment manufacturer. When I became a consultant, what I realized was that approach kind of shortchanged the hospital and the needs of the hospitals because, you know, what I was doing is potentially impacting the throughput capacity of the systems and basically not fulfilling the needs of the facility, itself. So again, I saw a lot of, early on, a lot of facilities go to equipment manufacturers. Well, actually, the design architects go to equipment suppliers to design systems and equipment. And at the same time, yeah, they were kind of getting a free service, but they were not looking at, the true needs of the facility owner and the end users. So I saw that a lot early in my career. And we still see that, some today where, we're going to go out to the equipment supplier, have them basically, design the system, and basically we save that cost. Occasionally we'll see one or two things is they oversell the, system and the equipment needs to make more profitability, or they cut the system down or equipment down to bare bones, and it impacts the capacity and basically doesn't fulfill the needs of the operators of the facility.
Yeah, you're bringing up a good point. With on as a regular supply chain guy supporting the clinicians, I always used to get upset because they would do what I call jeopardy purchasing, where they would go to a annual meeting, especially the radiologists. They go to RSNA, and they would come back and they'd have to have a certain piece of equipment, and they had so much leverage with the C-suite that they could pretty much demand it. So our job was not to assess and try to get them to get what was right, but to find a way to say yes to what they already wanted. And I think that with the development of robotics and autonomous vehicles, stuff like that, um, there's a danger of people that want to either renovate or build a new thing, starting out telling you what they want in their operation, whether they need it or not. Do you have to deal with that?
We do. And I'll go back to, early on when someone came and asked you, we need this addition because we're at capacity and we need additional equipment, we need additional space. There's really no way to disprove it. A lot of things were done through benchmarking and later on, my term with St. Onge, we started taking a look at really using and leveraging analytics to say, let's take a look at your request and see if they're founded or not. We've seen, the request that, we're at capacity with our ORs and, we need to build a new wing with four more ORs because we're at capacity. And when you go back and basically analyze the operations within the existing ORs, they're very, you can find out in the cover they're very, inefficient. One time we actually did an analysis for a state system, university hospital, and we were looking at their utilization of instrument trays. And after we did the analysis, they said they need more sterilizers and they needed more washers, they needed more equipment because they were at capacity. When we ran the analysis, we realized that um, they were using 13 trays of instruments per procedure, where the national average is 5.5. And that arose because the they didn't have accurate preference cards, and they let the doctors orders what they wanted. And for us, it wasn't a simple fix, but the right way to do things was go back and say, correct your preference cards, basically bring the tray utilization down so you're not pulling one instrument out of a whole tray. And basically, you don't need more equipment within your SVD. You know, Again, that's just saying in recent times, we've got the analytics now. Before we were using benchmarking and it was hard to tell, the requests weren't founded.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So what I heard in there was that by predicting demand accurately, you can be more accurate in predicting the space you need to fulfill that demand. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'll be, something we can talk about at our next podcast is predictive analytics.
Hmm.
Mine was basically just using data and basically, analyzing the data to define really what was happening with an existing operation before basically you decide to build something else. We were able to, verify through analysis that really the real problem was operational, not space and or equipment.
So, in the past 4 decades, what major design changes have you seen in the back of the house support departments?
Um, that is one of them, is really going from benchmarking. Um, Early on, we basically saw where, one size fits all. We can basically use this benchmarking from, previous facilities and then take it forward. However, one size fits all doesn't work. I'm a size 12 shoe, and it doesn't work well with my wife, who's a size 7. So, going from, a benchmarking methodology, we've basically gone into and basically starting to analyze data to basically say we're going to specifically look at a client's needs, their volumes, and then basically drive. Um, First, we define functionally what they want to do. Then we define the volumes to support that function. With that, we define equipment, and then finally space. And
Well,
that
just
was, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead. Finish.
That approach really basically gives a owner specific solution for their operations and facility.
Well, I was just going to say that, the size 12 versus a size 7, although it would look terrible, probably would work better for her than it would for you as far as comfort goes. Okay.
Exactly.
I mean, well, that would be a plus. She probably wears pointy-toed shoes too, which would make it even worse. But
Yeah,
that's just,
and I'll go back to the analogy where, we were talking to say, the logistics support departments got the leftovers. In other words, the size 12 shoe in the size 7 area, right?
yep.
You got to deal with what they give you. So, again, the past, 4 decades, we've gotten better at right sizing the operation to fit the specific needs of the client.
Yeah, I can tell you that I've been 3 places where I actually reduced the internal warehouse size because we were doing low unit of measure stuff, just in time stuff, and I've given up uh, I've given up 5 and 10,000 square feet a couple of times for other departments. Probably regretted it later, but I got out of there before they figured that out. But that was not uncommon either. If you could give up space to once again revenue producing departments, the organization was always ready and willing to take it, right?
Right.
So what about changes in logistic and transport systems over your career? What have you seen there?
I've seen, before there was kind of, again, one size fits all. When I first began working in the healthcare industry, they were utilizing, for example, pneumatic tube systems, but they were really utilized to move, medical records, some radiology files. It was really paperwork. Um, Through the evolution of technology, those systems became computerized, and their demand shifted from paperwork, which was now being transferred over to computers. Now those systems basically transported medications, things like medications, lab specimens back to laboratories. So we saw kind of a change of the systems utilizations based on technology. We also saw basically systems coming into the healthcare market basically to fit the needs of the operations. And what I mean by that is there's, again, not one system fits all. For example, the pneumatic tube system was more of a stat transport system, so it met that stat need. But what do you do about stuff that hadn't moved on a scheduled basis? So we started seeing AGVS moving into the marketplace and basically fulfilling that need. We saw AMRs, autonomous mobile robots, coming in, filling that need. We saw, pneumatic chutes basically taking a look at the transport of sold commodities. So what we were seeing, or what I saw over the last 4 decades, is really a matrix approach to transport systems. So you
Uh-huh.
have really multiple systems kind of fulfilling all the needs across the healthcare facility. You still have manual transport, of course, for larger items like your, Da Vinci machines, your C-arms. You still have to transport beds manually. But, the other commodities, we start taking a look at a variety of systems to basically fulfill that demand.
Yeah, and I know our next episode is going to be taking a look at the future, and it'll be interesting to see the impact of automated systems on the human component of transporting stuff. I mean, the fallback is always going to be a person pushing something. That's if all else fails, you better have a person who knows how to operate something that's on wheels. But but still, the shift toward robotics is a shift that um, really can impact the FTE's force of the organization too. So just to frame this, as we're almost done with our first episode here, is this first episode is out here to sort of set the stage by talking about how we've gotten to where we are today. And I would say that from my perspective, when I first came in, and I've said this many times on these podcasts, when I first came in to healthcare, there were about 7,500 community hospitals across the country, most of which were standalone organizations. There were very few systems, very few large systems, very few multiple hospital systems. And in supply chain, as far as logistics and transportation knowledge, all you needed to do was know how to pull the stuff off the truck, stage it on the dock, send it either to the warehouse or directly to where it needed to go. It was a very uncomplicated operation, really. And today, as we go into the future, um, as we go into the future, uh, the places that we have to deliver to, the fulfillment needs that are being dictated out there are changing so much that your job as a transport slash logistics designer becomes more and more challenging. Would you say that's fair?
That is fair. That is fair. And I just like to add, when we, go into the next episode, next podcast, what I'd like to add to that is, again, having spent 45 years within the industry and working with so many hospitals, there are things that should have been done, that could have been done, that still needs to be done. You know, I think there's things you can do design wise, there's things you can do through technology, but operationally, there's things that the owners can do to basically enhance their facility operations and their profitability. And we'll talk about that the next episode.
And I would just before we go to the next episode, sort of as a tease, um, would you say we're getting better at the front end now than we were 45 years ago at thinking the impact of what we're going to be doing today and what might happen tomorrow, or do you think we still have the same short-sighted challenges out there?
Both. As I said, the one I just mentioned is just kind of being short-sighted. It's something that could have been done the last 10, 15 years that hasn't been done. And, but there's things that, it's in the correct way. Um, but we need to pass on this knowledge to the people coming into the industry. So, they don't keep making the, same old mistakes, right?
Yep. And one final question. We have 1 minute here. Do you think those of us that run the supply chain are getting a little bit smarter about what we need to do, or are we still as in the dark about transport and logistics as we were when you started 45 years ago?
Um, well, from a vendor standpoint, I haven't seen a lot of change, because they're driven by profitability. I think they're starting to take a look at getting smarter internally because of the costs associated with supply chain. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think, what we're going to see is, through AI, even a greater improvement, and leap forward internally when it comes to healthcare and supply chain.
Well, that's great, Hugh. I appreciate you giving us painting the backdrop of what we're going to be dealing with in the future by telling us your experiences in the past, and I can't wait to do the second episode here because I'm interested to find out what things are going to look like in the future myself. So thanks for being on the episode today, Hugh, and we will look forward to seeing you on a second episode in the future. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the time to view my thoughts and look forward to number two.
Okay, Hugh, thank you. Take care. See ya.
Okay, bye bye.
Thanks again, everybody, for listening to our podcast, Taking the Supply Chain Pulse. Subscribe, follow, and give us your comments for topics or improvements. And if you know some people that you think we should be interviewing, please tell us about them too. I can be reached at fcrans, C-R-A-N-S, at stonge, S-T-O-N-G-E.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again. See you next time.